study about a new chapter called Education and British Rule. Education in pre-British times. By 18th century, the indigenous system of education was organized through pathshalas and madrasas. Both Hindu and Islamic education was traditional and it aimed towards conserving the existing customs. Many schools were run on the donations made by the rich people. Boys were educated at home or sent to schools. Girls did not have any access to education. Everything was learned by written and lengthy texts and were memorized by the students. Children learned reading, writing and arithmetic. In Sanskrit schools, Hindu religion and philosophy, logic and law were some of the subjects taught to higher caste pupils. In Persian schools, both Hindu and Muslim students studied the Persian language for official purposes. Law, philosophy, poetry, geometry and astronomy, these were some of the education during the company rule. The English East India Company, it did very little to promote education among the masses. In 1781 year, Warren Hastings established the Calcutta Madrasa to teach the Muslim law. In 1791, the Sanskrit College was set up at Banaras. The Fort William College was instituted in 1801 to teach the company officials about Indian law, customs and history. It was felt that knowledge of these areas would help the company officials in their administration. The college was also needed to produce qualified officials who could work in the administration. It is generally believed that colonial education was aimed at producing Indian clerks who would assist the administration. However, the introduction of colonial education was supposed to address many different aims and motivation and cannot be attributed only to a single cause. Lord Minto, the Governor General between the period 1807 to 1812, he wanted education to have a moral role by helping to maintain law and order and reducing the crime. In England, people held different views about whether Indians needed the Western education. People believed that Indian civilization was inferior to the Western civilization. Therefore, Western education was needed to uplift the Indians from their decadent way of life. Not everyone subscribed to this view. Some people also believed that Western education was needed to make India a part of the modern world. Some Indian intellectuals also held this view. They felt that Western education was needed to make Indians a part of the country's administration. Christian missionaries believed that Western education would assist in the spread of Christianity. Others believed that it would help spreading modern concepts like liberty, equality and fraternity. They believed that it would bring the Indian subjects closer to the British rulers. Anglicists and the Orientalists. In 1813, the Charter Act renewed the company rule for another 20 years. The ban on missionary activity was removed. The Act also allocated funds amounting to Rs 1 lakh for the expenditure on education. The matter of how government funds on education were to be utilized led to a heated debate. The matter on how government funds on education were to be utilized. This led to a heated debate. Anglicists were a group of thinkers who advocated the introduction of Western studies, science, philosophy and literature in the English medium. On the other hand, Orientalists were those people who wanted to promote Persian, Sanskrit and Arabic learning. Some people also advocated the teaching of Western knowledge through local languages. This debate was resolved through English Education Act of 1835. In the process leading up to the act, Thomas Macaulay delivered his famous memorandum on Indian education, also known as Macaulay's Minute. He argued forcefully for the adoption of Western education in India. The funds allocated for the education were spent on setting up the institutions of higher education in English medium. Elementary education was neglected. In 1844, it was announced that only those who were educated in English medium would get the government jobs. This created a rush for admission in English medium schools. Vernacular schools were reduced to a secondary stage. In 1854, the British stated their objective of creating a properly articulated system of education from primary school to the university levels. This comprehensive scheme was laid out in Wood's Dispatch of 1854. According to the Charles Wood, who had served on the Board of Control, British institutions could serve as models for education. Charles Wood came up with several recommendations to improve the existing systems. The main features of this dispatch were promotion of Western education using English as the medium of instruction, setting up vernacular schools at the primary level, and English medium schools and colleges at the secondary level, offering grants to the private schools which appointed qualified teachers and offered a proper standard of education, setting up universities modeled on London University in Bombay, Madras and Calcutta, giving due importance to setting up of technical colleges for vocational instructions, setting up departments of education in all the provinces to monitor and supervise the working of educational institutions and provide financial aid, establishing teacher training institutes for training and recruitment. These measures introduced a new and a very different system of education in India. The aims of the educational system were dictated by the aims of colonial administration. Teachers lost the freedom to decide what to teach and how to teach it. They became government servants and they were paid very low salaries. Most of the prescribed texts had no relation to the students' lives. Imparting education, it became a ritual, not unlike the written learning of the indigenous system. The colonial education system did not penetrate to the grassroots of the society. There was a dearth of primary schools in villages. It was open only to the boys. So by the beginning of 20th century, 3 out of 4 children grew up without any education. Scientific and technical education also lagged behind greatly. Education was too expensive to be affordable by everyone. Indian students had no exposure to their own culture. They regarded their heritage as a source of embarrassment rather than pride. However, Western education also acted as a unifier between people from different regions of the country by giving them a means of communication with each other. It spread modern ideas of rationalism, democracy, nationalism, and scientific spirit. It was not limited to any particular Indian reforms. Due to the problems mentioned above, the new system of education came to be questioned by the intelligentsia. They wanted the education system to give due importance to the Indian culture. Their efforts to change the system were also a part of growth of the nationalist movements. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, he was an early supporter of Western education. He set up Hindu College in Calcutta in 1817 with David Hare. He also founded the Vedanta College, which combined Indian and Western learning. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, he was a staunch advocate of women's education. He was the principal of the Sanskrit College, where he developed new methodologies of teaching. the Theosophical Society led by Annie Besant. It set up schools for both boys and girls. He also founded the Central High School at Banaras, now known as present Banaras Hindu University. The Arya Samaj, founded by Dayanand Saraswati, instituted the Dayanand Anglo-Vedic schools and colleges. They taught Western sciences while inculcating Indian values in the students at the same time. National education. National education movement was born as a reaction against the repression of the British. Satish Chandra Mukherjee was a pioneer in education who envisioned nationalism as love for the country and its people. He instituted the National Council of Education (NCE) in 1906. The NCE sought to impart learning in the vernacular languages to make it easier for students while also teaching them English. Ancient Indian history, philosophy, logic, law were also taught. The concept of natural education, it influenced the founding of many institutions like Kashi Vidyapeeth and Jamia Millia Islamia. Rabindranath Tagore. In 1901, Tagore set up an educational institution called VIII at Shantiniketan near Calcutta. The school started with only 5 students and aimed to bring the learning process closer to the nature, as opposed to the strict rote learning of British school. Here, creativity was encouraged. Fine arts, music, dance were given importance. Instead of the classroom classes, outdoor classes were conducted when possible. Instead of classroom, classes were conducted outdoors whenever possible. Tagore aimed to impart to the student a blend of best of the East and West. At Shantiniketan, teachers fostered the imagination instead of just disciplining the students. They helped the students to motivate themselves. This educational system increased the curiosity of the child. Many eminent personalities like the filmmaker Satyajit Ray and economist Amartya Sen, they have studied in Shantiniketan. Vishwabharati was given the status of university in Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi formulated an independent concept of education called Nai Talim, or basic education for all. Gandhiji was strongly against the alienation of Indian students from their native culture and heritage. He advocated the teaching of Indian history, philosophy, law, etc. in the schools. He envisioned a system where students paid equal attention to their mental, spiritual, and physical growth. He wished to include handicrafts like spinning, weaving, pottery in the school curriculum. Gandhiji also wanted the schools to be able to support themselves. This was because in a poverty-stricken society, self-supporting schools were the only way that education could reach the masses. Secondly, being economically independent would free the schools from the political influence of the government. He wanted the teachers to be free to use their own ideas in the classroom instead of following the government's guidelines. The teacher would then be able to form an actual connection with the student. Nai Talim was as much about moral growth as it was about the education. In this image we see Mahatma Gandhi. Education and the formation of a self-identity. Education had a deep influence on the growth of nationalism as the Indian people were exposed to the ideas of freedom, self-rule and democracy. Being removed from their own culture, many people strove to search for their own identity. This led to a rediscovery of Indian culture as people like Gandhiji, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, they invoked traditions of the past. Education also created privileged elite, which took up government jobs and garnered a lot of influence. This led to the demand for an educational system for the masses. Many people opposed the spread of Western education, claiming that it was harmful for the Indian culture. The evolution of education system in India was a very long and complex process.